Okay, so for today's video, I'm going to be replacing two of the servos on my Nano CP S, my Blade Nano CP S. I bought this used, and I have had nothing but troubles with it since I bought it. I've had it a couple of months, and I suspect that this is very old. I suspect that the guy that sold it had had it for maybe 3 or 4 years at least. So the servos, I've already replaced the one servo on the left side here. So that one's new. This servo here I replaced, so that one's new. So I'm going to do the back one, and I'm going to do the right side. Because what happens is the helicopter twitches like this in midair, and it wobbles and it jitters, and sometimes it'll drop really fast, like quite a bit. Other times it'll jerk really hard from, to one side or the other, forward, backward, whatever. And I have actually used deoxit fader spray, and I've sprayed it inside these channels here where the servo brushes go up and down. And it helped a little bit, but the servos are still screwy. So I ended up biting the bullet, and I went and I bought the new servos, which are these right here. They're the Spectrum servos. And the back one has a little bit longer wire on it because it has to reach farther. And as you can see, I live in Canada, so the prices are ridiculous. And I had to pay $19.50 for each servo, plus the one that's on it was also $20. So that's $60 in servos, and I only paid $60 for this when it was used. And I've already spent $153, not including batteries. So this has been a very expensive hobby. So anyway, I'm going to replace these servos, and I hope that that's the problem with it. It's a very simple procedure. There's 2 screws on each servo, one here and one on a diagonal down at the bottom. You take the 2 screws out, you unplug the servo. You have to take the servo arm off, the control arm. You pop that off, take it off the servo, and then you take off the old servo, put the new servo on, screw it in, and plug it back in, and you're good to go. Now the back servo, I suspect, is going to be a pain in the butt because the frame is in the way, and it's still the same 2 screws, but you can't take the control arm off. You can't unhook it because the frame up here is in the way of the control arm. So I think what I'm going to have to do is undo the servo, and then hopefully I can finagle the servo so that I can get the control arm off, and then I can swap it out. Another thing that I wanted to mention that I just thought of is that I've seen a YouTube video where the guy actually took the servo apart. So he disassembled the servo, and then he cleaned the servo brushes in here. He cleaned these with alcohol and a Q-tip, rubbing alcohol, and then he reassembled it. So that was his method of fixing the servo. Now I tried to do that with mine, and I couldn't get it apart because the screws are so tiny, and I couldn't get them off. So I was having trouble with my screwdriver mating with the screws. Now these screws here for that mount the servos, they're kind of a pain in the butt because they're crappy screws, and you have to have a very particular shape screwdriver tip in order to get them off, and I've had problems with mine. But other than that, all I can tell you is just be careful, don't strip them out. Okay, so I'm going to do this left one here, or the left one's already been done. I'm going to do the right one. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop off the servo arm. I use a pair of tweezers, and I just slide one of the blades underneath the control arm, and I just sort of press outwards and it'll pop off. I have actually broken my swash plate. When I was trying to pry one of the servo arms off, I actually pulled the swash plate arm apart, and I ended up having to buy another swash plate, and then that was, like everything, that was expensive. So okay, so now I'm going to take the screws out on the servo. Just follow the wires that go from the servo onto the board. You can pull the wire out. I use a little tool like this, which is a chip puller for computers, and it's great to just get underneath the plug, hold the board so that it doesn't, so you don't pull it off the little cushion mounts that it's on. So you unplug the servo wire, and then take the 2 screws out. And I'm already having trouble getting the screws out, so that's what I was saying a minute ago. You have to have a very specifically shaped screwdriver head, or you can't get these screws out. Nope, can't get it out. Okay, managed to break that one free. And I have a magnetic screwdriver, so it's nice for holding on to these tiny screws. Now the other screw on the right side servo is behind the cushion mount for the electronics board, so you have to kind of pull the mount out of the way in order to get the screw out. So hopefully you don't rip the cushion mount. So that's screw number 2. And then you just gently pull the servo off like that. One dead servo. Well, it still works, but it's pretty screwy. And then you get the new servo out and reverse the process. They don't give you any screws with the servos yet, so you're forced to use the screws that you took off. So if you strip one of them out, you're screwed. No pun intended. And there's 2 little pegs, there's 2 little pins where the opposite the 2 screws are 2 little pins, 2 little pegs that hold the other 2 sides of the servo. Okay, so then you plug in the new servo. You can't plug it in wrong because it's keyed. And voila! One servo replaced. Now we'll do the back one. Unplug the servo. Take out the 2 screws. Well, we have to remove the control arm, servo arm. Pop that off. Take out the 2 screws. And of course, when you do the rear screws or the rear servo, you've got the tail in the way. So that's fun. Okay, 2 screws. Now we'll see if we can finagle this control arm off of here. And you also have the wires for the tail boom right here, and they're in the way, so you're going to have to pry those out a little bit. They're very soft. They're very thin, flimsy wires, so just pull them out a little bit away from the servo, and we'll see if we can get it off somehow. Okay, so that's a pain, for sure. It takes a lot of finagling to get that out. And I see my servo arm is a little bent, so I'm just going to straighten it out a little bit if I can. Okay, so that is the second servo. Now we'll get the other new one. Servo arm has to go on first, and you hook it on. If you're looking at the back of the servo like this, the hook goes to the left and it hooks onto the top hole on the servo arm, or the servo rather. And then of course you drop it and it falls off. This takes quite a bit of finagling to get this out and to get it back in, because you have the tail motor wires are in the way, and the servo arm, the servo wires are in the way. There we go. Okay. I got the servo onto the 2 pins. Now I have to put the 2 screws back in. When you're doing this back servo, you might want to take the tail boom off. All you have to do to take the tail boom off is pull outwards and the wires will come out with it and everything. Unfortunately, I glued my tail boom on by mistake. I had some cracks in my tail boom, so I glued them with some super glue, and 2 of the spots were dry, and I didn't check the 3rd spot, and when I stuck the tail boom back in the hole into the frame, the tail boom got glued on. So unfortunately, my tail boom is on there for good. That's 1 screw. Here's the 2nd screw. That screw actually feels like it's stripped, unfortunately. Okay, that one is not stripped. Okay, so we route the wire underneath the canopy support. Over top of there, I'm just going to cut off this piece of paper or pull it off or whatever because it's too big. There we go. Plug the servo back in, the new servo I should say, plug it in. And that'll do her. Now you just reconnect the servo arms. Be very gentle because they do break. And when you're finished, just double check to make sure that your the vibration dampener on the bottom of the board, make sure that these little the 4 little rubber mounts haven't come out, because they can pop out, and then your board would be sitting on an angle and then your gyro wouldn't work properly. So that's it for that procedure.